It seems that one army in particular is rather head and shoulders above most of the others at the moment in 10th edition, and with recent tournament data backing this up by a near 80% win rate in some cases, it does look like the Aeldari are going to need a little bit of reining in with the next balanced data slate. And one of the big reasons for their absolutely overwhelming dominance at the moment appears to be their indescribably strong army rule, which is the Strands of Fate dice. And what these do, if you aren't aware, is that they let you roll 12 dice at the start of the game, and these become your Strands of Fate dice, and you can use whatever you rolled as guaranteed results for things like advance rolls, battle shock, charge, damage, hit rolls, saves, or even wound rolls. So in essence, you know for certain when the game begins, you are going to have 12 dice rolls that you can absolutely guarantee. And they won't all be sixes, it's not like their 9th edition version, but you will know if you have 3 threes on your fate dice, that if you have a unit that hits on 3s, you can guarantee that that unit will hit with one of those dice rolls. So you do have in your head 12 dice that you can absolutely guarantee you know what you can do with, and you know exactly when you are going to need to use them to get a guaranteed hit or a guaranteed wound or a guaranteed save. So I mean, this is just unbelievably strong in a dice-based game where there is that element of luck and randomness from the dice rolls. And what makes it even stronger is that you can re-roll these at the start of the game, dropping a dice each time. So if you don't like the 12 you got, you could re-roll 11 dice and hope for more 4s or 5s or 6s if you got a load of 1s and 2s and 3s in your initial roll. And so that really is a problem. It is a big problem being able to turn 1 know that you can get 3 or 4 guaranteed hits, or that you have 4 4s on your fate dice, so that is at least 4 attacks that may go into your avatar with a 4-up invuln that you can guarantee you are going to make, because no matter what goes into him, as long as it's letting him take his invuln, you can just plonk down those 4 fate dice and you've just automatically passed those 4 invuln saves. And indeed, I was reading a story on Reddit the other day where someone charged Angron into an avatar and managed to get something like 3 wounds through, which would of course potentially spell big trouble for the avatar with Angron's d6 plus 2 damage strike attacks, but instead the Aeldari player just used 3 fate dice with a 4 on and automatically passed all of those saves, potentially saving the avatar's molten skin. And the issue isn't just having so many guaranteed dice either. Sisters with their miracle dice technically get more most of the time over the course of the game, but for the sisters they are spread out over 5 battle rounds. Having those 12 or 11 or even 10 guaranteed dice from turn 1 just means that you can absolutely front load all of your damage output or your saves, whatever you need. If you need a key enemy unit dead, you can just use all of your fate dice to make sure you get the hits you need, make sure you get the wounds you need, and make sure you get the damage you need to make sure it's going to be dead, so you can get exactly what you want turn 1, or keep exactly what you want to stay alive. And just that small change, just that one enemy unit dead or your one unit still alive, can potentially swing a game in your favour right from the start of turn 1. So I mean, it is a big problem, and it's exacerbated by the fact that you have other things like Eldrad, who grants you an extra 3 fate dice, even Guardians that grant you extra fate dice when they're on objectives. You really can get that front-loaded power, as well as having some more generated over the course of the game, so you don't feel as bad about using all of them just on one first initial destructive salvo into the enemy. And I think there are a few things that could be changed to limit their overall game-changing power. And so in the video today, I just wanted to share a couple of ideas that I had, and also listen to some of yours, and see if we can figure out how to rein in some of the Aeldari's runaway power. The first, and obviously easiest option, is simply you get less of them. With 12 guaranteed and 15 with Eldrad, as well as extras from the aforementioned Guardians and even certain enhancements like the Weeping Stones or the Reader of the Runes, it can just be too much. What if instead of those base 12, you got even just a small drop to 10? That would immediately give you less guaranteed results, and maybe instead of re-rolling all the dice and just dropping one each time, maybe if you wanted to re-roll any dice, you had to drop a fate dice to do it. So say in your fate roll you got 2 1s and 2 2s. At the moment, you could re-roll the whole set if you wanted, and you would just drop 1 dice to re-roll everything. Whereas in my potential example, if you got those 2 1s and 2 2s, you could of course re-roll both the 1s, because they're the worst result you can get, but you would have to drop 2 dice to do it. So you would have to drop, in essence, those 2 rolls of a 2, and just hope that those 2 1s you re-rolled into 4s or 5s or 6s. It would just mean it's less of a no-brainer to re-roll the whole set if you get a slightly under average or even just an average set of dice rolls. If you get, a perfectly average set of dice rolls with the 12 you've got, you're almost incentivized to re-roll anyway because you're only losing 1, you're still getting 11 dice, and you could potentially spike it to get a load of 5s and 6s, which would of course massively improve your damage output. Another option is taking the Sisters route, and instead of getting those front-loaded 12 at the start of the game, what if in each battle round maybe you got to roll 3 fate dice? And this would actually get you more over the course of the game, so you wouldn't really be losing anything in terms of power, it would just be spread out. So you'd only get 3 guaranteed dice each battle round, which would make it a lot harder to front load your damage output right from the start. That, I have to say, I think is a pretty elegant solution. Any of those, dropping the amount, making you have to reroll more when you wanted to do the rerolls, or just spreading them out over the course of the battle, all of them are fairly elegant solutions, I think, and would help to keep the power of fate dice, which I think is important. It's a cool mechanic, and I don't want Aeldari players to think that I'm trying to take away their power. It would just limit it in some ways to make it more of a no-brainer. The Aeldari players would have to consider things a bit more about whether it was worth re-rolling certain dice, and just be a bit more cagey about how they were going to use them, rather than just knowing that they've got this big pool of 12 dice that they can just shove into 1 or 2 units and just blow anything off the other side of the board. Another option is, again, like the Sisters of Battle, putting a limit on just how many fate dice can be used per unit per phase, because at the moment there is none. If you had, say, 4 6s in your fate pool, and you managed to get 4 wounds through from the Avatar's strike attack on his Wailing Doom, you could 100% use those 4 6s to make sure that his damage rolls were all 6s, letting him dole out a whopping 32 damage to the enemy, which is massive overkill, but you get my point. You can just stack it all onto one crucial hit and make sure that whatever you are in combat with or whatever you're shooting at absolutely will die. If you could instead only use 1 fate dice per unit per phase, you couldn't do that, and you'd have to, again, think a bit more and strategize a bit more about when you were going to use it. Are you going to use it for that hit roll, or wait for a wound roll, or wait and get that guaranteed 6 on the d6 damage if it gets through? It would ensure that you could only save against 1 attack 2, rather than getting hit by Angron like we mentioned earlier, and just knowing that you've got enough dice to not even have to roll. You just know you are going to survive it because you've got 4 dice that are 4+ on your fate pool, so you can just use them and be like, yep, Avatar's fine. It just would, again, I think, add in that element of thought a bit more, rather than just knowing that you can use as much as you want whenever you want. And you really would have to, again, like I said, be a bit more cagey about how you spread them out and how you use them on a given turn. Because, I mean, to be fair, it's exactly what Sisters get. And I think most people would agree Sisters at the moment in 10th are a little bit underwhelming, but maybe there needs to be a middle ground. Maybe the Aeldari version of Fate Dice is too powerful and the Sisters Miracle Dice is not quite good enough. Maybe there needs to be a middle ground for it, but I certainly think that heading towards the Sisters way of putting a limit on how much you can use on a unit in a phase is better than just having a free-for-all and being able to use all 12 Fate Dice on 1 unit in a turn if you really wanted to. And then there is also the option of changing how Fate Dice interact, and in particular this affects a unit which is the Wraith Knight, because the Wraith Knight on its heavy Wraith cannon has Devastating Wounds, and Devastating Wounds means that on a 6 to wound, a critical wound, that instead does wounds equal to the weapon's damage in mortal wounds, and fate dice specifically count as an unmodified roll. So if you use a fate dice of a 6 on a heavy wraith cannon on its wound roll, that is going to be 2d6 mortal wounds into an enemy. And of course, with the way it is now, you could use 2 more 6s if you had them to get that guaranteed 12 mortal wounds into an enemy. So essentially, if you had a fate dice of a 3 and then 3 6s, you could guarantee a hit, you could guarantee a critical wound, and then you could guarantee 12 mortal wounds onto an enemy without ever having to roll a dice. And I mean, yes, that is 4 of your 12 fate dice, but that could potentially take out the key enemy unit and win the game for you without a dice ever even being rolled. And it just feels so unfun and gamey to do all that without rolling a dice. You just get to choose the results and be like, yep, that unit there that I don't like, it's gone. Don't have to roll anything, I know I'm going to hit it, I know I'm going to wound it, and I know I'm going to do 12 mortal wounds. Bye-bye. It just takes the dice rolling out of a dice rolling game, which for me just loses the whole point. If instead fate dice counted as modified rolls, and I mean, let's be honest, they should do because they are modified. You are modifying the dice roll. I don't understand why they weren't to begin with. It would still mean you can get that 6 to wound, so you will still be wounding anything in the game, but it just won't count as a critical wound, so it won't trigger the devastating wounds rule. So even though it's -4 AP, it's still going to be getting through most armor, but it won't be bypassing 2-up saves, and the opponent will still get any invuns that it may have, which gives their key powerful unit a much more reasonable chance of surviving such a big hit, rather than just being a feels bad, you have to pick up your favorite unit off the table because it's now dead. The final potential thing that I've seen people talk about is maybe changing some of the Aeldari units themselves, actually nerfing some units like the Wraith Knight so it's more expensive or the weapons just aren't quite as good, so there is less interaction with the fate dice making powerful things overpowered. I'll be honest, this is my least favourite option because I think the issue itself is the fate dice. The problem isn't, although they're quite strong in some cases, the issue isn't a lot of the index data sheets, and if you nerf a Wraith Knight but keep fate dice the same, there will be another unit that jumps to the front of being overpowered with it. The issue itself is the fate dice, and changing them is going to be the way to rein in the Aeldari power while still keeping their units fun and cool and usable. So I do think that reining them in, either giving Aeldari players less to play around with from the get-go, or limiting how many they can use per unit per phase, or just by having them not count as unmodified rolls, and so preventing them from interacting things like critical hits and critical wounds, is one of those options is the key way, the best way, the most straightforward way to minimize the power of fate dice, still keeping them strong and still keeping them a fun system to have for the Aeldari, but taking away so much of the bite and power that Aeldari seem to have at the moment. So that is the Aeldari fate dice. As I said, I think any 3 of the options that I've mentioned would massively reduce Aeldari power to a reasonable level. In order of my preference, I think making them count as modified rolls is the best one. Then after that, I would say putting a cap on the maximum that can be used on a unit each phase makes sense. And then my least favourite is just giving the Aeldari players less overall, because that feels the least fun. As I said earlier, it probably is the simplest, easiest option for them, but I would say that's probably the least fun for Aeldari players, and I want this system to be a fun one for Aeldari players because I'm actually starting an Aeldari force anyway, so I do want the system to be fun to use, I just don't want it to be obnoxious. But as always, I would really love to know your thoughts on the fate dice. Are they too powerful? And how would you change them to bring them in line and make the Aeldari a bit more balanced? Let me know your thoughts below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.